The Alps are the highest and most extensive mountain range system that lies entirely in Europe, stretching approximately 1,200 kilometers across 8 Alpine countries: Austria, France, Germany, Italy, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Slovenia, and Switzerland. The Caucasus Mountains are higher, and the Urals longer, but both lie partly in Asia. The mountains were formed over tens of millions of years as the African and Eurasian tectonic plates collided. Extreme shortening caused by the event resulted in marine sedimentary rocks rising by thrusting and folding into high mountain peaks such as Mont Blanc and the Matterhorn. Mont Blanc spans the French-Italian border, and at 4,810 meters is the highest mountain in the Alps. The Alpine region area contains about 100 peaks higher than 4,000 meters, known as the 4000ers. The altitude and size of the range affects the climate in Europe. In the mountains, precipitation levels vary greatly and climatic conditions consist of distinct zones. Wildlife such as ibex live in the higher peaks to elevations of 3,400 meters. And plants such as edelweiss grow in rocky areas in lower elevations as well as in higher elevations. Evidence of human habitation in the Alps goes back to the Paleolithic era. A mummified man, determined to be 5,000 years old, was discovered on a glacier at the Austrian-Italian border in 1991. By the 6th century BC, the Celtic Latin culture was well established. Hannibal famously crossed the Alps with a herd of elephants, and the Romans had settlements in the region. In 1800 Napoleon crossed one of the mountain passes with an army of 40,000. The 18th and 19th centuries saw an influx of naturalists, writers, and artists, in particular the Romantics, followed by the Golden Age of alpinism as mountaineers began to ascend the peaks. In World War II, Adolf Hitler kept a base of operation in the Bavarian Alps throughout the war. The Alpine region has a strong cultural identity. The traditional culture of farming, cheese-making, and woodworking still exists in Alpine villages. Although the tourist industry began to grow early in the 20th century and expanded greatly after World War II to become the dominant industry by the end of the century. The Winter Olympic Games have been hosted in the Swiss, French, Italian, Austrian and German Alps. At present, the region is home to 14 million people and has 120 million annual visitors. Etymology and toponymy. The English word Alps derives from the Latin Alps. Maurus Servius Honoratus, an ancient commentator of Virgil, says in his commentary that all high mountains are called Alps by Celts. The term may be common to Italo-Celtic, because the Celtic languages have terms for high mountains derived from Alp. This may be consistent with the theory that in Greek Alps is a name of non-Indo-European origin. According to the Old English Dictionary, the Latin Alps might possibly derive from a pre-Indo-European word *alb, hill. Albania is a related derivation. Albania, a name not native to the region known as the country of Albania, has been used as a name for a number of mountainous areas across Europe. It's likely that Alba and Albus have common origins deriving from the association of the tops of tall mountains or steep hills with snow. In modern languages, the term Alp, Alb or Alp refers to a grazing pastures in the alpine regions below the glaciers, not the peaks. An Alp refers to a high mountain pasture where cows are taken to be grazed during the summer months and where hay barns can be found. And the term, the Alps, referring to the mountains, is a misnomer. The term for the mountain peaks varies by nation and language. Words such as Horn, Kogel, Gipfel, Spitz, and Berg are used in German-speaking regions. Mont, Pic, Denton Aguila in French-speaking regions, and Monte, Pica or Cima in Italian-speaking regions. German Alpin is the accusative in origin, but was made a nominative in modern German, whence also Geography. The Alps are a crescent-shaped geographic feature of Central Europe that ranges in a 800 km arc from east to west and is 200 km in width. The mean height of the mountain peaks is 2.5 kilometers. The range stretches from the Mediterranean Sea north above the Po Basin, extending through France from Grenoble, eastward through mid and southern Switzerland. The range continues toward Vienna in Austria, and east to the Adriatic Sea and into Slovenia. To the south it dips into northern Italy and to the north extends to the south border of Bavaria in Germany. In areas like Chiasso, Switzerland, and Neuschwanstein, Bavaria, the demarcation between the mountain range and the flatlands are clear. In other places such as Geneva, the demarcation is less clear. The countries with the greatest alpine territory are Switzerland, France, Austria and Italy. The highest portion of the range is divided by the glacial trough of the Rhone Valley, with the Pennine Alps from Mont Blanc to the Matterhorn and Monte Rosa on the southern side, and the Bernese Alps on the northern. The peaks in the easterly portion of the range, in Austria and Slovenia, are smaller than those in the central and western portions. The variances in nomenclature in the region spanned by the Alps makes classification of the mountains and subregions difficult, but a general classification is that of the Eastern Alps and Western Alps, with the divide between the two occurring in eastern Switzerland according to geologist Stefan Schmid, near the Splügen Pass. The highest peaks of the Western Alps and Eastern Alps, respectively, are Mont Blanc, at 4,810 meters and Piz ed Bernina at 4,049 meters. The second highest major peaks are Monte Rosa at 4,634 meters and Ortler at 3,905 meters. Respectively. Series of lower mountain ranges run parallel to the main chain of the Alps, including the French Prealps in France and the Jura Mountains in Switzerland and France. The secondary chain of the Alps follows the watershed from the Mediterranean Sea to the Wienerwald, passing over many of the highest and most well-known peaks in the Alps. Upon reaching the Swiss border, the line of the main chain heads approximately east-northeast, a heading it follows until its end near Vienna. Passes. The Alps have been crossed for war and commerce, and by pilgrims, students and tourists. Crossing routes by road, train or foot are known as passes, and usually consist of depressions in the mountains in which a valley leads from the plains and hilly pre-mountainous zones. In the medieval period, hospices were established by religious orders at the summits of many of the main passes. The most important passes are the Col de l'Isère, the Brenner Pass, the Mont Cenis, the Great Street, Bernhard Pass, the Col de Tenda, the Gotthard Pass, the Semmering Pass, and the Stelvio Pass. Crossing the Italian-Austrian border, the Brenner Pass separates the Ötztal Alps and Zillertal Alps and has been in use as a trading route since the 14th century. The lowest of the Alpine passes at 985 meters. The Semmering crosses from Lower Austria to Styria. Since the 12th century, when a hospice was built there, it has seen continuous use. A railroad with a tunnel 1 mile long was built along the route of the pass in the mid-19th century. With a summit of 2,469 meters, the Great Street, Bernhard Pass is one of the highest in the Alps, crossing the Italian-Swiss border east of the Pennine Alps along the flanks of Mont Blanc. The pass was used by Napoleon Bonaparte to cross 40,000 troops in 1800. The St. Gotthard Pass crosses from central Switzerland to Ticino. In the late 19th century, the 14 kilometers long St. Gotthard Tunnel was built, connecting Lucerne in Switzerland with Milan in Italy. The Mont Cenis Pass has been a major commercial road between Western Europe and Italy. Now the pass has been supplanted by the Frejus Road and Rail Tunnel. At 2,756 meters, the Stelvio Pass in northern Italy is one of the highest of the Alpine passes. The road was built in the 1820s. The highest pass in the Alps is the Col de l'Isère in Savoy at 2,770 meters. Orogeny and geology. Important geological concepts were established as naturalists began studying the rock formations of the Alps in the 18th century. In the mid-19th century, the now-defunct theory of geosynclines was used to explain the presence of folded mountain chains, but by the mid-20th century the theory of plate tectonics became widely accepted. The formation of the Alps was an episodic process that began about 300 million years ago. In the Paleozoic era, the Pangaean supercontinent consisted of a single tectonic plate. It broke into separate plates during the Mesozoic era, and the Tethys Sea developed between Laurasia and Gondwana during the Jurassic period. The Tethys was later squeezed between colliding plates, causing the formation of mountain ranges called the Alpida Belt, from Gibraltar through the Himalayas to Indonesia, a process that began at the end of the Mesozoic and continues into the present. The formation of the Alps was a segment of this orogenic process, caused by the collision between the African and the Eurasian plates that began in the late Cretaceous period. Under extreme compressive stresses and pressure, marine sedimentary rocks were uplifted, creating characteristic recumbent folds, or naps, and thrust faults. As the rising peaks underwent erosion, a layer of marine flysch sediments was deposited in the fallen basin, and the sediments became involved in younger naps as the orogeny progressed. Coarse sediments from the continual uplift and erosion were later deposited in fallen areas as molasse. The molasse regions in Switzerland and Bavaria were well developed and saw further upthrusting of flysch. The Alpine orogeny occurred in ongoing cycles through to the Paleogene, causing differences in nappe structures, with a late-stage orogeny causing the development of the Jura Mountains. A series of tectonic events in the Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous periods caused different paleogeographic regions. The Alps are subdivided by different lithology and nappe structure according to the orogenic events that affected them. The geological subdivision differentiates the Western, Eastern Alps and Southern Alps. The Helveticum in the north, the Penninicum and Austro-Alpine system in the center and south of the Peri-Adriatic seam, the Southern Alpine system. According to geologist Stefan Schmid, because the Western Alps underwent a metamorphic event in the Cenozoic era while the Austro-Alpine peaks underwent an event in the Cretaceous period, the two areas show distinct differences in nappe formations. Flysch deposits in the southern Alps of Lombardy probably occurred in the Cretaceous or later. Peaks in France, Italy and Switzerland lie in the Huilier zone, which consists of basement with sediments from the Mesozoic era. Higher massifs, with external sedimentary cover, are more common in the Western Alps and were affected by Neogene period thin skin thrusting, whereas the Eastern Alps have comparatively few high-peaked massifs. In simple terms, the structure of the Alps consists of layers of rock of European, African and oceanic origin. The bottom nappe structure is of continental European origin, above which are stacked marine sediment nappes, topped off by nappes derived from the African plate. The Matterhorn is an example of the ongoing orogeny and shows evidence of great folding. The tip of the mountain consists of gneisses from the African plate. The base of the peak, below the glaciated area, consists of European basement rock. The sequence of Tethyan marine sediments and their oceanic basement is sandwiched between rock derived from the African and European plates. The core regions of the Alpine orogenic belt have been folded and fractured in such a manner that erosion created the characteristic steep vertical peaks of the Swiss Alps that rise seemingly straight out of the fallen areas. Peaks such as Mont Blanc, the Matterhorn, and high peaks in the Pennine Alps, the Briançonnais, and Hohe consist of layers of rock from the various orogenies, including exposures of basement rock, 4000ers, and ascents. The Union Internationale des Associations d'Alpinisme has defined a list of 82 official alpine summits that reach at least 4,000 meters. The list includes not only mountains, but also subpeaks with little prominence that are considered important mountaineering objectives. Below are listed the 22 4000ers, with at least 500 meters of prominence. While Mont Blanc was first climbed in 1786, most of the Alpine 4000ers were climbed during the first half of the 19th century. The ascent of the Matterhorn in 1865 marked the end of the golden age of alpinism. Karl Blodek was among the first to successfully climb all the major 4,000 meters peaks. He completed his series of ascents in 1911. The first British Mont Blanc ascent was in 1788, the first female ascent in 1819. By the mid-1850s, Swiss mountaineers had ascended most of the peaks and were eagerly sought as mountain guides. Edward Whymper reached the top of the Matterhorn in 1865, and in 1938 the last of the 6 great north faces of the Alps was climbed with the first ascent of the Eiger Nordwand. Minerals. The Alps are a source of minerals that have been mined for thousands of years. In the 8th to 6th centuries BC, during the Hallstatt culture, Celtic tribes mined copper. Later the Romans mined gold for coins in the Bad Gastein area. Erzberg in Styria furnishes high-quality iron ore for the steel industry. Crystals are found throughout much of the Alpine region, such as cinnabar, amethyst, and quartz. The cinnabar deposits in Slovenia are a notable source of cinnabar pigments. Alpine crystals have been studied and collected for hundreds of years, and began to be classified in the 18th century. Leonhard Euler studied the shapes of crystals, and by the 19th century crystal hunting was common in Alpine regions. David Friedrich Weiser amassed a collection of 8,000 crystals that he studied and documented. In the 20th century, Robert Parker wrote a well-known work about the rock crystals of the Swiss Alps. At the same period, a commission was established to control and standardize the naming of alpine minerals. Glaciers. In the Miocene epoch, the mountains underwent severe erosion because of glaciation, which was noted in the mid-19th century by naturalist Louis Agassiz, who presented a paper proclaiming the Alps were covered in ice of various intervals, a theory he formed when studying rocks near his Neuchâtel home, which he believed originated to the west in the Bernese Oberland. Because of his work, he came to be known as the father of the Ice Age concept, although other naturalists before him put forth similar ideas. Agassiz studied glacier movement in the 1840s at the Unteraar Glacier, where he found the glacier moved 100 meters per year, more rapidly in the middle than at the edges. His work was continued by other scientists, and now a permanent laboratory exists inside a glacier under the Jungfraujoch, devoted exclusively to the study of alpine glaciers. Glaciers pick up rocks and sediment with them as they flow. This causes erosion and the formation of valleys over time. The Inn Valley is an example of a valley carved by glaciers during the ice ages, with a typical terrace structure caused by erosion. Eroded rocks from the most recent ice age lie at the bottom of the valley, while the top of the valley consists of erosion from earlier ice ages. Glacial valleys have characteristically steep walls. Valleys with lower reliefs and tailor slopes are remnants of glacial troughs or previously infilled valleys. Moraines, piles of rock picked up during the movement of the glacier, accumulate at edges, center and the terminus of glaciers. Alpine glaciers can be straight rivers of ice, long sweeping rivers, spread in a fan-like shape, in curtains of ice that hang from vertical slopes of the mountain peaks. Some glaciers flow in two directions, such as the glacier between the Jungfrau and the Monch in Switzerland and the Simmerlorn Glacier on the border of Italy and Austria. The stress of the movement causes the ice to break and crack loudly, perhaps explaining why the mountains were believed to be home to dragons in the medieval period. The cracking creates unpredictable and dangerous crevasses, often invisible under new snowfall, which cause the greatest danger to mountaineers. Glaciers end in ice caves by trailing into a lake or river, or by shedding snow melt on a meadow. Sometimes a piece of glacier will detach or break, resulting in flooding, property damage and loss of life. In the 17th century, about 2,500 people were killed by an avalanche in a village on the French-Italian border. In the 19th century, 120 homes in a village near Zermatt were destroyed by an avalanche. High levels of precipitation cause the glaciers to descend to permafrost levels in some areas, whereas in other, more arid regions, glaciers remain above about the 3,500 meters level. The 1,817 square kilometers of the Alps covered by glaciers in 1876 had shrunk to 1,342 square kilometers by 1973, resulting in decreased river runoff levels. 40% of the glaciation in Austria has disappeared since 1850, and 30% of that in Switzerland.